got two wonderful guests today who are going to be talking about demand generation in a skeptical world. The first is Gaetano DiNardi. So outside of marketing, Gaetano is an accomplished music producer and songwriter. He's worked with major artists like Fat Joe, Shaggy, and loves making music to stay turbocharged. And then Joshua Giardino, possessing a unique combination of skills as a full-stack developer and marketer. Joshua has had the privilege of solving marketing and attribution challenges for brands like Grainger, LG, Complex, and FTD. So I will leave it to you two to take it away.
Sweet. Josh, I guess I'll share the deck, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, I'll share my screen, share the deck, and then I guess we can start kicking this thing off.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, awesome. There we go. We should be good. Awesome. Cool. So I guess I'm just going to get right into this then. Who we are and who are we and why should you care about what we have to say? I guess we already got introduced, but here's a look at our LinkedIn profiles. If you want to connect with Joshua and I on LinkedIn, feel free to go for it. We're pretty friendly and easygoing guys. So feel free to hit us up there if you want to connect. That sounds good to us.
Definitely.
Yeah, so I guess, Josh, maybe you can kick it off with some initial thoughts around what's going on in the world of marketing and sales and why it's already hard.
Sure. So I think everybody is acutely aware now that marketing is getting harder, but it's always been hard. It's always been difficult to be a marketer or in sales for primarily two reasons. One, competition, and two, skepticism. Buyers don't want to be sold to. They don't want to be given a solution. They want to be educated. And so based on that, currently marketing and sales is only going to get harder. Gaetano, can you go through to the next one? Largely because customer acquisition costs have historically been on the rise, and everyone is doubling down on their expense now with the current crisis. Sales cycles have gone longer for most products, and so budget is shifting more towards top and middle funnel. And we're going to see that reflected in continued trend of customer acquisition cost increase.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to add than that. Cost of acquisition was already going up before COVID, and now that you don't have things like events going on, everything's just getting dumped into digital. So the digital highways are getting more crowded, more expensive, and more cluttered. There's really no way else around that. So Josh, I guess maybe you can talk about some of these stats that we found in a little bit of our research as we put this deck together.
Sure. So the first thing I think everybody decided to do if they were a marketing publication or sales publication was survey. They wanted to see how behaviors were changing in light of coronavirus to try to get some sense of A, how to serve their own audience, but B, also to get a pulse on where things are going and how everyone is feeling about the situation. And the data is suggesting that 1 in 4 marketing leaders are increasing their marketing efforts. This isn't causing fear. This is causing resolution. Everyone is resolute. It's time to go hard, double down on what's working. And what's working is retention and service. Serving your customers and focusing on keeping who you have, reduce churn, because your best customer or the best acquisition is the customer you already have.
Agreed. An example of this is something that we had to do and are still doing at Nextiva. For the audience listening, Nextiva is a cloud communications company that enables businesses to basically work from anywhere with a number of communication tools like digital voice over IP, business phone service software, coupled together with HD video, team messaging, collaboration tools, things like that. And once the COVID-19 crisis started affecting our business, what we realized was support queues were rising through the roof, like double and triple the amount of support calls daily that we weren't ready for, right? That we weren't used to seeing that much volume. And what we realized was the trend was basically like 90% of people calling to ask about how to use the app, how to use the desktop app, how to use the mobile app, because now obviously people are moving away from the office and working from home. So what we realized was, you know what? We need to cut these queues down and we need to do it fast. Otherwise, people are going to get pissed and maybe even cancel. So we started a customer webinar program, and we ran like 5 webinars a day. And we cut that down a bit because we've educated our customer base pretty well by this point. But for the first like month or two, we were running 5 webinars a day, 5 days a week, live webinars, educating customers on how to use the app, how to get it set up, practical use cases for it, how to basically transition your office communication to working from home remote. So that's a practical example of something we had to do to double down on retention and service. And as Josh said, this is the best way to maintain your customer base, right? Like not lose the ones you have during a time of crisis. So we can move on, but just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, Nextiva is uniquely positioned in one of the few markets that are known to be exploding right now, which is anything related to remote working.
Yeah, we're fortunate to be in the minority, I guess you could say, where let's say if you're a non-essential part of the tech stack, you're probably cut by now, or in the process of getting cut, because it's no secret that companies are trying to reduce spend and conserve. But fortunately for Nextiva, we're one of the technologies that actually enable businesses to perform during a time of crisis like now. So we're uniquely positioned, as you mentioned, Josh. But anyway, CMOs on coronavirus, some macro strategies. So Josh, I'll let you dive into some of this as well.
Sure. So this is an example of some of the data we were looking at when trying to figure out which direction marketing and sales professionals are heading. And the survey comes from Singular. It was also featured, I believe, on Inc. or Forbes. And it's very simple. What big picture strategies are you allocating resources towards? This is where 1 in 4 are going for more advertising, and just about everybody is focusing on retention and service, but also things like unexpected new offers, opportunities, and tactics. And everyone is leaning towards building now for future benefits. So taking a long-term horizon on this. But with all this extra revenue going into marketing, advertising, and sales effort, buyers are already skeptical. This is why marketing and sales is hard.
Yeah, we've got some examples here of basically headlines that kind of emphasize the things we've already been talking about. And this has been happening since like 2015, 2017, 2019. B2B buyers remain skeptical about vendor content, right? I think that's pretty obvious. Everyone knows that a lot of B2B brands, they always try to position themselves more favorably in a lot of these content pieces, right? Like the most classic example I can think of is a CRM company producing the dreaded 10 reasons why you need a CRM, right? Like, and there's hundreds of examples of that. I don't know if I have much more to comment on this, but Josh, any thoughts before we move on to the next slide?
Just a reminder that it's not new, it's a trend and it's not going anywhere. And one potential side effect, law of unintended consequences, you're going to spend more money to be more present. You're going to see more fatigue from your potential buyers, more skepticism.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so this is from HubSpot. We took this because, we felt it was a pretty impactful statement to kind of tie things up before we move on to the next section. But basically, the hard truth is that your customers need you a lot less than they used to. And that goes for prospects as well, especially in companies where your sales cycles are much shorter, more higher velocity, more transactional. A lot of it is moving to self-service. This was true for my time at Pipedrive. This is true now for Nextiva. This tends to align with products that have smaller average contract values, but even for larger contract values, the reality is that most prospects and customers are learning from friends, learning from peers, learning from customer reviews, going to sites like G2 and Trustpilot and GetApp and Capterra and so on. They don't learn from salespeople, right? They don't learn from marketers. They don't trust marketers. We already saw that. They'd rather help themselves than call you. And that is a harsh reality for a lot of companies, a lot of people in sales and marketing and B2B. Unfortunately, it's just the truth, and it's better to just accept things for the way they are. I don't know if I have much more to add on that. Josh, any thoughts before we move on to the next slide?
Just that this is true equally for salespeople as well as marketers. We see a lot of this on Sales Hacker. Our most popular content is always like stack recommendations and tool recommendations. So they're looking for authoritative vouchers, not sales collateral.
Yeah, agreed. This was true for my time at Sales Hacker as well. For those who don't know, by the way, Josh and I have worked together since probably like 2013. Previously at a marketing agency in New York, and then we teamed up again at Sales Hacker during my time there. And then after the acquisition by Outreach, we decided to split ways. But as you can see, we still keep in touch and do cool shit like this. So yeah, let's keep it going. So how do we build resilient strategies that actually make a difference? Josh, maybe you can talk a little bit about this part as well.
So I think that's the $1 million question on everybody's mind is how do we build resilient strategies that make a difference? Strategies that can weather the storm no matter what comes. Mark Cuban gives great advice on this, which is to treat your customers like they own you, because they do. Without your customers, you really don't have a business. You have a product perhaps, but the boneyard is littered with failed startups, failed companies. Success is the minority, not the majority. And it all begins with fanatical customer service. This is something we experience at Outreach, who own Sales Hacker. At Sales Hacker, we exemplify it. I know Gaetano can speak to how they manage this at Nextiva as well. And it really does make all the difference. Like, this is a value we try to live, and we see it work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for everyone listening, basically, the company I work for, Nextiva, was founded on the principles of amazing customer service. And that was one of the motivations for actually starting the company back in 2008, because the incumbents in the arena, companies like Vonage and many, many others that are more legacy, big enterprise telecom providers, they're notoriously, how should I say, reputable for bad service, really long queue, hold times, act like they don't care about you, right? And Nextiva said, you know what, we're going to actually take a different angle on this. And part of the brand promise of Nextiva is amazing service, and that phrase, amazing service, was trademarked back in 2008, and it's something that we use in our marketing materials today. And it's one of the reasons that a lot of businesses prefer to go with us than the big giants, because they'd rather have a more personalized service experience. And they know when they call in, they're going to get kind of the hand-holding treatment, if you will, rather than just being kind of offloaded to some outsourced support or some kind of channel partner that is kind of like a contracted service provider or something like that. It's all in-house, and that's what our customers really like.
One way to apply that tactically for demand generation marketers is to work with customer success and figure out which features really drive value and retention for your customers, and move some of that information up into the buyer education process, highlight those features and how they add value. It's one of those things that will reach the tipping point for your customer or your prospects.
Definitely. I mean, we go as far as taking screenshots of reviews that we get on G2 and such, and using that directly on landing pages, right? So that social proof during the shopping process is huge, and we're not shy about doing that. So so here's a snippet from good old Seth Godin. I think he's one of the most well-known marketers out there, but he pretty much nails it here with a brand is a set of expectations, memories, stories, and relationships. When you put all that together, it does account for a consumer's decision to choose one product or service over another. And that is basically why what gets remembered gets done, right? What gets repeated gets remembered, what gets remembered gets done. And a lot of companies now, they keep, hammering home a certain message, and it works. We're going to show a lot of examples of companies who have done a great job of marketing during the COVID crisis in the coming slides.
Additionally, don't forget that your brand is a fictional person in a sense. Like, the relationship really is what matters. It goes back to what Mark Cuban was saying about treating your customers like they own you, because it's all about the relationship. And just like our relationship with other individuals, we can choose to end that relationship if it's not working for us. So always bear that in mind.
Definitely. So let's get into some of the good stuff here. So don't do this, right? This, right? And like, I probably should have blurred out this guy's name, but who cares? Because no one really knows what on.com is. But long story short, I mean, don't do this, right? This is an example of emails that I am still getting, right? This came in on May 5th, 3:14 in the afternoon, in the middle of a crisis, a global pandemic. And it's, typical text vomit, blah, 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 blah. Don't care, right? Like, how are these kinds of emails still getting sent? Like, that's the question that I think is so like mind blowing, right? Like, how is this even still happening? It's a complete tone deaf, right? So this is an example of what not to do. I think this is pretty obvious, but we just wanted to show this because people don't believe that it's still happening. Like, get more leads for enterprise IT. Look at that subject line, right? Like, how awful is that? So not much more to add here. Josh, any thoughts before we move on?
Just that this really is happening a lot more than, as marketers, we would expect to see. We would hope there'd be a lot less of this happening right now.
Yeah, agreed.
And so the key takeaway is don't be robotic. That's probably just an automation process that's been baked into the company and nobody's looked at it right now in light of what's actually going on.
Agreed. I mean, the first thing Nextiva did, like once we realized this crisis was for real and it was really radiating in a huge way, we said, you know what, let's stop all automation, all marketing automation. Let's stop it. Let's pause all nurture content. Let's pause anything that's trigger based because we don't want it to come across as tone deaf. It's just too uncertain right now. And we need to rethink the messaging for all these streams, right? And that proved to be the right thing to do because companies who didn't do that, they get screenshotted and they get put into slide decks like this. So let's continue. I guess the point here is be human and don't just be human, be yourself. We're going to show some examples of this coming up now. So maybe Josh, you could speak to some of these.
So as for being yourself, this means your brand has to have a voice and a tone and values, and it has to live that. And we're seeing that the brands that have already prepared that are experiencing major payoffs. Again, these strategies are resilient. They work in great times, they work in lean times, they work in uncertain times. So the coronavirus has challenged all brands to be more human, to be more empathetic, to think about how their tone comes across, but also to think about how they can give rather than receive during these times. So we're going to show a bunch of great examples on that and show how they help you win as a brand. So here's a counter example. Do you want to dive into this, Gaetano?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kick it off. I mean, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, but essentially Spirit scrambled, but ultimately failed to stop an email to customers urging them to, quote unquote, book a trip today in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, this is obviously way worse than the example I showed about get enterprise leads from IT companies ASAP. But I mean, this is pretty embarrassing. And, it goes to really lack of preparation, lack of thought, and just lack of empathy, really, right? Like someone forgot to say, yeah, we need to pause all of these automated messages that are going out because we're in the middle of a crisis. We have other examples. Josh, any other thoughts on this one?
Not really. Just as you noted, it's a great example of an automation gone wrong and why those need to be the first thing tactically that you look at in any uncertain set of circumstances.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, this is another example, right? I actually have no mercy for whoever this company is. I've never heard of them. I get probably, I mean, if there's probably a lot of salespeople watching this. This is just one of the many examples of emails that I continue to get, during this crisis period. But even outside of a crisis, I probably get 2-3 of these a day, right? And look at this. They put Kramer from Seinfeld and a turkey, right? And talking about, is today Halloween or Tuesday? Join us for this webinar, like customer data event. Look at that CTA. You butternut forget to register. Like, come on, really? Like, I just, happy Thanksgiving from Telium on May 8th. Right? Like, this is just like an example of so many things gone wrong. I want to know who at this company greenlighted this, who got in a room and said, who wrote this email copy, who approved it, who said, yes, this is awesome. This is a hilarious thing. Kramer Turkey wants to see you. Yes. Like, who in the hell said yes to this? That's what I want to know. I mean, I guess we can move on, but nothing much more to add there. Josh, any thoughts?
Just that this is a great example of a company that was trying to be relevant, but didn't have a brand voice and brand values already in place. And so it was the right thing executed the wrong way. They tried to address the elephant in the room, to try to be human and to have a sense of humor, but it landed flat. I mean, sometimes it's great to take risks, but when you take risks, they don't always work. And one way to hedge your risk is to plan for this stuff before you need it. Have a disaster plan, but most importantly, have brand voice, have brand values. Know what you stand for and how you want to express yourself across all your channels.
Agreed. And I guess finally, it's like, if you're going to take risks like this, why don't you run it by some people outside of the company and say,
Well
hey,
said.
is this right? Like, is this like, we're in our own little bubble here. We all think this is awesome. Are we crazy? Like, is this totally whacked? And this company obviously didn't do that. So I guess let's keep going. Josh, maybe you could talk about this one.
So this is a great example of food service ads. Same thing, trying to be edgy, trying to be hip, trying to engage with culture, but it was tone deaf. We're being encouraged to wash our hands to the point of compulsiveness, and a series of brands throw out a series of ad creative that has people with their fingers in their mouth. It's just an example of tone deaf advertising that's always going to backfire. And ultimately, you can argue no news or no press is bad press. But at the same time, if a brand is a series of experiences and relationships, how does this experience impact your brand in the long term? Is this something you really want to be on the receiving end from? It's easy to avoid.
Agreed. So be authentic. And an example of brands actually getting it right is hotels.com. They are the opposite of Spirit Airlines, right? They went with a very against the grain message, and they addressed the elephant in a room in a really creative way by employing this Captain Obvious figure to kind of play off of the social distancing message. And they basically said, stay at home. We're a hotels company, and we're telling you don't book any hotels. We're counterintuitive approach here. Like, yes, we need revenue and we need to maintain our business, but we're going to go against that and tell you not to support our business during a time of crisis, because it can really backfire and have damaging results. Let's go to the next example. Maybe Josh, you can talk about this one.
Another great example of embracing the situation. McDonald's decided to promote free food for first responders, who have been, all of our first responders have been champions during this series of circumstances and have had to endure all manner of stress. So McDonald's, rather than trying to take, decided to give. And because they were being authentic to their values, for example, they have the Ronald McDonald House, something they've been doing. They have a long history of cost marketing that is genuinely tied to their brand. And this is just one more example of them taking those values and actualizing them. It's a resilient strategy that works 100% of the time, no matter what the circumstances are.
Definitely. Getting into the next wave of the presentation here around transparency. So this basically is a headline that came out that's similar to some of the other headlines we shared, but do brands lie? Most consumers think so, right? And that's another reason why things like transparency, and a tactical example of this is like pricing pages, right? Like, don't be one of those companies that have gotchas or hidden clauses that you didn't see during pricing. Then you get on the phone with sales and you say, oh, the pricing page didn't mention that. How come I'm getting informed about all these hidden costs now? It was advertised at this, and now my price is actually going to be this. Yeah, I don't like that, right? And that's basically what this headline is talking about there. Maybe Josh, you can talk about the Airbnb situation.
So this is an example of having to face the elephant in the room. Airbnb's business has taken a hit for the same reason hotels everywhere are taking a hit. But rather than try to hide that bad news, they were transparent about it. They were proactive about getting it out there themselves into the press, but weren't just open about the bad news. They were transparent about what they were doing to help those employees. They paid their health insurance and gave them a 3-year severance bonus. So obviously no one wants to see mass layoffs, and that can cause a negative brand perception. But Airbnb managed to, through transparency, totally turn it around. This leaves, I think, a good feeling in everyone's heart. If you have to lay somebody off, the least you can do is make sure that they're separated in a way that's going to let them land on their feet.
Agreed. It's a good example here. So I guess let's actually talk about how to win tactically. So be charitable, right? So this, we're going to show you many examples of this. It's a way that companies are actually using charitable tactics to get good press, to create positive sentiment around the brand, especially during a time of crisis. And one way that Nextiva actually has done that is helping United Way raise $2.6 million in virtual telethons, right? So we held a series of contests and essentially with our channel partners and brand partners and affiliates and such, and we basically helped raise $2.6 million for United Way. And this is one of the many charitable things that we do throughout the year, but this was a special one that we did specifically around the crisis, right? Another thing we did earlier last year was we donated $21,000 and over 1,000 pairs of socks to the K2 Adventures Foundation. So we're always doing things like this. We have a organization within our company called Nextiva Cares. It's a charity that basically donates to various causes that we care about throughout the year. And we're always doing this stuff all year round, not just during times of crisis, but these are things that we do because we believe in them and also because it has a positive brand effect, right? And I think a lot of companies do stuff like this, but we try to find unique ways to make them exciting and different rather than just say, hey, CEO hands a check of X million dollars to some company that he believes in. We actually try to make an event out of it. But these are just some of the examples that we do. I'm sure other companies do other great things, but this stuff is important and it shouldn't be looked down upon in any way. Maybe Josh, you could talk about Publix and some of the other bigger, more national known brands that are doing things to create positive sentiment around their brands.
Sure. Just a quick aside related to the Nextiva example. They're not the only B2B tech company that does this. At Outreach and Sales Hacker, we have the concept of days of service, where it's also baked into our DNA. We routinely, as a company, find ways to give back. Publix is a great example of cause marketing being baked into the company's tactics as well as part of their DNA and leading to a resilient strategy. This isn't an opportunity they have all the time, but because they had the mechanisms in place to execute strategically, they saw a need and were able to fill it. I'm sure most of you have heard that there are examples of food shortages, milk being dumped, not being able to be redirected due to shipping disruptions. Both Publix and Kroger, two major food distribution chains, grocery stores, were able to use their shipping infrastructure to reroute that milk and bring it to food banks, who have also been facing a really hard time with their supply chain and so are short on food at a time when everybody needs it. This is a great example of living your values. The fact that they received a brand lift from it is wonderful, but it wasn't their primary goal, and that's why they will receive a brand lift from it, because it's authentic and it's truly charitable. It meets a need.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Kroger kind of piggybacking off the Publix play, but this is a real crisis that's happening in the agriculture and farming and produce sector, right? Like excess dairy is now just being wasted. And there's because consumption's way down. So Kroger's kind of stepping in there, buying it, redirecting that surplus dairy production to food banks, right? Because there are hungry people out there that still need help. So they're fulfilling that and having a positive brand effect as a result. Getting into building trust. So let's just do some old school versus new school before we start to get to the end here. Basically, old school was, buying decisions were influenced by ebooks and white papers, right? Like some B2B company produces a mass ebook, right, with a bunch of stats and data and such. and hoping that that would influence, a decision from why you need to move from on-premise to the cloud now, right? It goes off the example I said before. A CRM company produces the dreaded 10 reasons why you need a CRM. Like, I think everyone knows they need a CRM. It's not a secret at this point, right? And yet companies are still producing that. New school is buying decisions are influenced by reviews and thought leaders and peers, right? I think there's no secret to that. And people are starting to realize that that's the case now. As Josh shared from the sales hacker example, the top content is always stacked tech stack recommendations, what I'm using today, what's working in the field, use cases around how you're actually using that tech effectively. Same thing here. People trusted companies in the old school. Now people trust people. We're tribal. We trust humans. We want to see human faces. If you're a brand now, I think you have to try and figure out how do I not remain a faceless, tasteless brand, right? Like, how do I actually put some personality into it? Who from the company is going to represent us on the front lines? I think that's a question every company needs to figure out. Then in the old school, decisions were less emotional and usually based only on cost to benefit analysis. Whereas today, decisions are definitely emotional, and people they prefer to choose brands that align to their values, right? And I think that Kroger and Publix example is definitely going to win over the hearts and minds of people who believe in environmental friendliness and doing the right thing to support agriculture and farming, right? Giving back to people in need. Like, that's going to definitely attract a certain customer type. Whereas, the Walmarts of the world are still winning based on, low everyday prices, right? So I think that's just some examples there. Josh, any thoughts or comments to add to this slide?
There are whole businesses and platforms being built that help surface reviews and brands built around thought leaders and their recommendations. So as a brand, you have two choices. You can rely on those, or you can start to build your own growth engine that helps you champion yourself through your reviews and to raise up your own customers as thought leaders. So in old, new, you have two great options, but I would definitely recommend that you emphasize building rather than borrowing.
Agreed. So some real tactical ways on how to build brand trust in a modern world. So don't pander, have values, and apply them consistently. I think you saw that with a lot of the examples we shared from Hotels.com, McDonald's, Kroger, Publix, et cetera. Use social proof, awards, reviews, testimonials. I gave you guys some snippets of that and how we're doing that at Nextiva, screenshotting reviews that we get on sites like G2, Trustpilot, GetApp, et cetera. Using that on landing pages, using your awards, reviews, and testimonials and recognition, things like those G2 badges, right? Slap those right on your pricing page, right on your feature pages, right? If you won some kind of award in G2 that says the rated easiest to use solution for mid-market, that's a huge thing to apply on a landing page, right? Cause marketing, we talked about that. Co-marketing and sponsorship campaigns with brands that your audience trusts. I think that is a hugely underrated tactic, and one that, Sales Hacker has definitely, kind of the whole brand of Sales Hacker was built on this concept, right? Find the best and most trustworthy B2B sales and marketing brands and do as much co-marketing with them as possible. So weekly webinars, Q&As and Ask Me Anything sessions, right? Obviously, the events were a big deal when events were actually a thing. Now it's all going virtual. But even just the contributor community too, right? Like getting people onto the site to contribute, guest articles, and now the forum, which exists as part of the new Sales Hacker. And I think that's really awesome. And then sharing the brand story, of course, various examples of this. Guest publish on websites that your audience cares about. Get interviewed on podcasts or YouTube channels. That's another highly underrated tactic, I would say. And then obviously, the YouTube branding campaigns, things like Monday.com and Wix and what's some of the other ones, Grammarly and many others, right? They're constantly hammering you with that brand message with those 15-second video clips on YouTube. And it's a great way to drive brand awareness, through the roof, right? I think everyone now knows of Monday.com, Wix, and Grammarly because they just go all in on that YouTube strategy. And it obviously works because I just remembered them right now and rattled them off the top of my head. But Josh, any other thoughts on modern ways to build brand trust?
These aren't mutually exclusive. For example, cause marketing is a type of co-marketing, and it's an opportunity to share your brand story, but from a values and company as a person rather than company as a product.
Totally. Agreed. Yeah. So, here's a tactical example of how I, as a demand marketer, am leveraging some of this stuff in things like email streams, right? Subject line, what are Nextiva customers saying? Don't take our word for it. Check out hundreds of reviews and ratings from top sources and verified users, sending them to our reviews, right? We're not shy about it. Sending them a snapshot of some of the numbers that go to back up our claims here. And then simply the CTA, ready to chat, give us a call. That simple, right? Short, to the point emails, leveraging social proof, things like all of our sources that cite our ratings and reviews, right? These are the ways to win trust in a skeptical world, right? And as we said, this whole presentation has been based around skeptical buyers who don't trust brands. So instead of sending them, the classic, oh, here's this white paper that we produced on all these reasons why you need to, move to the cloud for your business communication and all this stuff, why on-premise is dying, blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, forget all that. Let's just see what people are actually saying. Let's get to that. And this is a real tactical example here of that putting into practice. So I hope this is useful to you. Josh, any other thoughts on this one?
It's a very powerful tactic. I've seen it work in many situations. Another great example of this kind of tactic is using your customers as influencers, showing how they've solved problems, what their gains and growth were from using your product in a very similar way to the example Gaetano highlighted with social proof.
Definitely. Yeah, Josh, maybe you can talk about this one. This is an example of Gravity Payments, a brand that you and I both admire. Maybe you can share some thoughts on this one.
Gravity Payments the CEO took a lot of heat for this initially because of his radical move to raise the minimum salary to $70,000 per year based on research that suggested that once you start making that much money, additional money doesn't really affect your happiness or quality of life. So he decided to implement it in practice. At first, they took a lot of heat because of his own salary differential, but because of transparency and living their values, he reduced his own salary and totally changed the brand perception. It increased trust, and now Gravity Payments is a monster in an industry that's historically been very difficult to break into or disrupt, which is payments. And this is largely because of infrastructural issues. It's deeply entrenched and hard to compete with that kind of already in place infrastructure compared to like Visa, MasterCard, or Bank of America. So by simply being transparent, they've been able to win.
I love this example. And if you're a CEO, right, and your salary is, X number of millions a year, you got to think about it. Like, what really is the difference? But if, let's say your salary is $500,000 a year or it's $1 million a year, the quality of your life is still awesome. Right? Do you really need that extra $500K in the bank to just sit there, maybe invest in shit, get a nice house, whatever, all those material things that come with it? Obviously, you want to build a future for your family and your kids and, start thinking about generational wealth. But, this CEO came out and said, my happiness is far greater by having less of my own personal wealth and distributing that throughout the company. Everyone's going to do great work. The brand is going to succeed and take off and last much longer. And we're going to have a place that we can be proud of as a company. And I think this is a tremendous example.
And tactic. Go ahead.
Sorry, guys. I'm just going to pop in here because we're just 2 minutes to time. I just wanted to remind everyone that if they did have any questions, because we won't have a chance to do a proper Q&A here, there is a dedicated Slack channel for you two. It's #QA_Gaetano_Joshua. It's going to be just slapped in the chat here so that you guys can grab that link. We'll also be able to share your slides, right, guys?
Definitely.
Okay, perfect. So we'll have that. We'll be able to share the full recording of everything here. If there was anything else that you guys wanted to kind of share to the audience, maybe you guys can do that in your Q&A channel. And then any other questions that people had about your presentation, they can ask them there. Just unfortunately, we've got to hop off onto the next guest here who is going to be Mark Roberge, talking about the science of reestablishing growth, when, where, and how. So if you're watching on the stream, follow us along there. If you're going to join the Zoom, you're going to get an email. You're going to have an email and you're going to follow the link there. But anyway, Gaetano and Joshua will be hanging out in that Slack channel for a while, so they can continue the conversation with you there, answer any of your questions. Thank you so much, you guys.
Sounds good. Sorry we ran out of time, everyone, but feel free to hit us up in Slack, and it's been great hanging out with you. Sorry we ran out of time, but we love nerding out over this stuff, obviously, so
totally
got a little carried away.
All good. Looking forward to continuing that conversation there.
Thank you.
And so
Thanks, guys.
we'll
Awesome.
kill this
Thanks,
room,
guys.
and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. Thank you so much, you two.